Some secrets are buried so deep in plain sight that the whole world watches without ever truly seeing. It was October 15, 1983, and the Golden Harvest Studios in Hong Kong buzzed with the electric energy that only comes when legends collide on camera. The monsoon rains drummed against the warehouse roof as Marcus Chen adjusted his clipboard, watching two of the greatest martial artists in the world prepare for what should have been just another fight sequence. He'd coordinated stunts for dozens of films, but something felt different that day. The air itself seemed to crackle with intention he couldn't name. When Benny Urquidez hit the concrete floor and didn't get back up, Marcus expected chaos. Instead, he witnessed something that defied everything he thought he knew about filmmaking, about reality itself. Jackie Chan didn't call cut. He didn't shout for a medic. Instead, he knelt beside the unconscious fighter and began whispering words in a dialect Marcus had never heard, his hands moving in patterns that seemed to pull shadows from the studio lights. 40 years later, as cancer eats away at his body, Marcus Chen knows he's running out of time to understand what he saw that day, and why everyone connected to that moment has started dying in ways that make no earthly sense. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Hook. Marcus Chen's fingers trembled as he closed the manila folder, the photographs inside showing faces he hadn't seen in decades, faces that belonged to dead men. The afternoon light filtering through his cramped Los Angeles apartment felt thin and gray, much like everything else in his life these days. The oncologist's words from last Tuesday still echoed in his mind. 6 months, maybe 8, if you're lucky. Lucky. He almost laughed at that. The stack of obituaries on his kitchen table told a different story about luck. Tommy Wong, fight choreographer extraordinaire, found dead in his San Francisco apartment in perfect horse stance, fists clenched as if mid-strike. David Liu, former Golden Harvest stunt double, discovered in his Bangkok hotel room frozen in a defensive posture, arms raised to block an attack that never came. 5 others, all connected to that rainy October day in 1983, all dead within the past 18 months, all found in impossible fighting positions. Marcus reached for his coffee mug with hands that barely cooperated anymore, the chemotherapy having stolen his steady grip along with his hair and appetite. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who'd spent his career calculating the precise physics of staged violence was now being destroyed by his own body's rebellion. His laptop chimed with another Google alert, another obituary. This time it was Chen Wei-ming, a prop master who'd been on set that day. Heart attack in Taipei, the article said, though it failed to mention how the 67-year-old man had somehow ended up balanced on one leg in a perfect crane stance when his wife found him. The pattern was undeniable now, even if it made no rational sense. Marcus navigated to his private photo archive, the one he'd been building for 40 years as head film archivist at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Thousands of behind-the-scenes photographs, production stills and candid shots from sets across Hollywood and Hong Kong. Most people thought he'd just been documenting film history. They were wrong. He'd been hunting. Every image of Jackie Chan from that era, every frame of footage he could legally, and sometimes illegally, obtain. Searching for something, anything, that might explain what he'd witnessed in that warehouse. The whispered words, the strange hand movements, the way shadows had seemed to bend and flow around Chan's fingers like living things, and the way Benny had changed afterward. Marcus pulled up the folder labeled JC 1983 Post and scrolled through dozens of photographs. Here was Jackie 3 weeks after the incident. On the set of Project A, his movements somehow more fluid, more precise than before. There he was a month later at a publicity event, his smile exactly the same but his eyes different, deeper, as if he were seeing something the rest of them couldn't. The phone rang, startling Marcus from his obsession. The caller ID showed unknown, but at this point in his life he answered everything. Too many doctors, too many specialists, too many people with clipboards managing his decline. Marcus Chen? The voice was female, accented with something European. French, maybe. Yes? My name is Dr. Elizabeth Moreau. I understand you've been making inquiries about certain unusual deaths in the martial arts community. Marcus's blood went cold. He'd been careful with his research, discreet with his questions. How did this woman know about his investigation? "I'm sorry, who is this?" "Someone who might have answers to questions you've been asking for 40 years. A pause. "Questions about what you witnessed on October 15th, 1983, at Golden Harvest Studios." The phone felt slippery in Marcus's palm. No one knew the exact date except him. He'd never written it down, never spoken of it to anyone. The official production records listed it as October 14th, a detail he'd verified repeatedly over the years, always wondering why his memory felt so crystalline about that single day when everything else from that era had grown soft around the edges. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Mr. Chen, you're dying. We both know this. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed 7 weeks ago. Dr. Patricia Hoffman at Cedars-Sinai estimated 6 to 8 months. Her voice carried no malice, just statement of fact. "I can offer you something more valuable than time. I can offer you truth." Marcus's hand found the edge of his kitchen table, gripping it for support. Through his window, Los Angeles sprawled in all directions, 8 million people going about their lives, completely unaware that something ancient and impossible might be moving among them. What kind of truth? The kind that explains why everyone who is in that warehouse is dying in ways that violate the basic laws of physics. The kind that might help you understand what Jackie Chan really did to Benny Urquidez that day. Another pause. And what it means for the rest of us. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 4 decades pressing down on him like studio lights. In the distance, sirens wailed through the Los Angeles afternoon, carrying someone else toward their own reckoning with mortality. "Where do you want to meet?" "Griffith Observatory," Dr. Moreau said without hesitation. "Tonight, 9 o'clock. Come alone and bring whatever documentation you've collected over the years." The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He set the phone down with shaking hands and stared at the manila folders scattered across his kitchen table. 40 years of meticulous documentation that he'd told himself was just thorough archival work. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that Marcus Chen had been slowly going insane, one photograph at a time. His apartment reflected this gradual descent into obsession. What had once been the tidy home of a respected film archivist had transformed into something resembling a conspiracy theorist's bunker. The walls were covered with timeline charts, photographs connected by red string, and copies of martial arts magazines dating back to the early 80s. His neighbors probably thought he was just another eccentric retiree, but Marcus knew better. He was a man haunted by something that shouldn't exist. The irony was that he'd built a distinguished career on preserving the illusion of movies, while secretly hunting for evidence of the impossible. Marcus walked slowly to his bathroom mirror, each step a reminder of how the cancer had hollowed him out from the inside. The man looking back at him bore little resemblance to the eager 29-year-old stunt coordinator who'd worked 16-hour days and dreamed of revolutionizing action choreography. That Marcus had been strong, confident, ambitious. This Marcus was a walking skeleton, held together by stubborn curiosity and pain medication. He opened the medicine cabinet, revealing neat rows of pill bottles, oxycodone, ondansetron, lorazepam, a pharmaceutical timeline of his body's systematic failure. Dr. Hoffman had been gentle but direct. The cancer was aggressive, the treatment options limited. He could fight it and maybe steal a few extra months of nausea and weakness, or he could focus on comfort care and try to find some peace in whatever time remained. Marcus had chosen a third option. He'd chosen to finally hunt down the truth about that October day, consequences be damned. The decision had cost him what little family he had left. His daughter Sarah had stopped returning his calls after he'd missed her birthday dinner to chase down a lead in San Francisco. His ex-wife Linda thought he'd lost his mind, telling their mutual friends that the cancer had affected his brain. They weren't entirely wrong. The disease had certainly changed his priorities, stripping away the polite pretenses that had governed his careful, documented life. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Sarah's contact. Their last conversation had ended badly, with her begging him to focus on spending quality time with his granddaughter instead of chasing ghosts from old kung fu movies. The phrase had stung because it revealed how little she understood what he'd witnessed. This wasn't about movies. This was about something that existed in the spaces between frames, something that camera lenses couldn't quite capture but human eyes couldn't forget. Marcus typed and deleted a dozen different messages to Sarah before giving up. How could he explain that he might finally have answers? That Dr. Elizabeth Moreau, whoever she was, seemed to know details about that day that no one else should possess. His daughter would just see another sign of his deteriorating mental state. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus tried to eat something. The doctors insisted he maintain his caloric intake, but everything tasted like cardboard. He attempted to nap, but found himself staring at the ceiling, replaying that phone conversation. Dr. Moreau had known about his cancer diagnosis, had known the exact date of the incident, had known about his private investigation. Either she was connected to whatever he'd witnessed, or she was monitoring him in ways that should have terrified him. Strangely, he felt relieved. After 40 years of solitary obsession, someone else finally seemed to understand that something impossible had happened in that Hong Kong warehouse. As the sun set over Los Angeles, Marcus gathered his most important files into a weathered leather messenger bag, the same one he'd carried to film sets in the 80s. Photographs of Jackie Chan before and after the incident, copies of insurance reports from that day's filming, medical records he'd obtained through questionable means, showing that Benny Urquidez had somehow tested stronger and faster in the weeks following his collapse than he ever had before. And buried at the bottom of the bag, wrapped in acid-free archival tissue, was the single piece of evidence he'd never shown anyone, a small piece of fabric he'd secretly taken from Benny's costume that day. Under ultraviolet light, it revealed strange symbols that seemed to shift and move when viewed directly. Marcus had spent decades trying to research their origin, but they matched no known written language. He locked his apartment door, knowing it might be the last time he stood in these rooms surrounded by his life's work. The cancer had already taken his future. Tonight might take his past as well. But as he walked toward his car, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. After 4 decades of questions, he was finally going to get some answers, even if those answers killed him. Marcus's hands shook as he tried to insert the key into his car's ignition, the tremor more from anticipation than the cancer this time. The drive to Griffith Observatory would take 40 minutes in evening traffic, giving him too much time to second-guess what he was about to do. But as he pulled out of his apartment complex's parking garage, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Change of plans. Yamashiro Restaurant instead. Tell the hostess you're meeting the Lotus Group. Come now. Marcus stared at the message, his car idling at a red light. Yamashiro, the Japanese restaurant perched in the Hollywood Hills, built to look like a traditional palace. He'd been there once in the 80s with Linda, back when he still believed their marriage might survive his obsessions. The place was expensive, public, not at all the kind of location he'd expected for clandestine revelations about supernatural martial arts. The change unnerved him, but he was already committed. He turned toward the hills, watching the city lights blur past his windows like stars falling in slow motion. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in Yamashiro's ornate lobby, feeling underdressed in his worn cardigan and jeans. The hostess, a young woman with perfect posture and a practiced smile, looked him up and down with barely concealed concern. He probably looked like what he was, a dying man clutching a messenger bag full of conspiracy theories. "I'm here to meet the Lotus Group," he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. Her expression shifted immediately, the professional pleasantness replaced by something more guarded. "Of course. Please follow me." She led him through the main dining room, past tables of well-dressed couples sharing sushi and sake, toward a section of the restaurant Marcus didn't remember from his previous visit. They passed through a door marked private events and down a hallway lined with traditional Japanese artwork. The sounds of the main restaurant faded behind them. "Here," the hostess said, stopping at an unmarked door. She knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times in rapid succession. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, and her pale green eyes seemed to catalog every detail about him in a single glance. "Mr. Chen, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Moreau. Her French accent was more pronounced in person. "Please, come in." Marcus stepped into what appeared to be a private dining room, but as his eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, he realized it was something else entirely. The walls were covered with photographs, martial arts masters, film sets, behind-the-scenes shots from Hong Kong action movies spanning decades. And there, in the center of one wall, was a photograph he'd never seen before. Jackie Chan and Benny Urquidez on the day of the incident, both men smiling for the camera. But Jackie's shadow in the image seemed wrong somehow, too long and oddly shaped. "Sit," Dr. Moreau said, gesturing to a chair at a small table. "We have much to discuss, and very little time." "Time for what?" Marcus remained standing, his grip tightening on his messenger bag. "For you to decide whether you want to die as an obsessed archivist with unanswered questions, or as a man who helped expose something that has been hiding in plain sight for centuries." She poured tea from an ornate pot, the steam carrying an unfamiliar earthy scent. "The people killing your former colleagues will come for you soon, probably within the week." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "What people?" "The same organization that has been using Hollywood as a testing ground for human enhancement experiments since the 1920s. The same group that recruited Jackie Chan when he was still a teenager at the China Drama Academy." Dr. Moreau sipped her tea calmly. "They call themselves the Iron Lotus Society, though their roots go back much further than that name suggests." The messenger bag suddenly felt impossibly heavy in Marcus's hands. 40 years of careful investigation, and now a stranger was casually confirming his wildest theories over tea in a Hollywood restaurant. "Why should I believe you?" Dr. Moreau reached into her purse and withdrew a small object wrapped in black silk. She placed it on the table between them and carefully unwrapped it, revealing what looked like an ancient coin made of dark metal. The surface was covered in symbols that made Marcus's vision blur if he looked at them directly. "Because you have a piece of fabric in that bag that bears similar markings. Because you've spent 4 decades wondering why everyone who witnessed what happened that day is dying in impossible ways. And because whether you believe me or not, they're coming for you." She leaned forward, her green eyes reflecting the candlelight like a cat's. "The question is, do you want to face them with answers, or do you want to die as confused and terrified as the rest?" Marcus stared at the coin, then at the photographs on the walls, then at this woman who claimed to know secrets that could explain everything. Outside, Los Angeles continued its nightly dance of lights and shadows, unaware that in a hidden room above the city, a dying man was about to make the most important choice of his life. Marcus's hands trembled as he stared at the ancient coin, its twisted symbols seeming to writhe in the flickering candlelight. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to return to his quiet apartment and spend his remaining months in peaceful denial. But 40 years of questions held him frozen in place like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. "I need proof," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Real proof, not just coins and theories." Dr. Moreau smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Proof has a price, Mr. Chen. Once you see what I can show you, there's no going back to ignorance. No returning to the comfortable delusion that what you witnessed was just an hallucination brought on by stress and poor lighting." Marcus thought of Sarah, of the granddaughter he barely knew, of the normal life he could still salvage from the wreckage of his obsession. The cancer would take him soon enough. Did he really want to spend his final weeks diving deeper into something that might be pure madness? His daughter's words echoed in his memory, chasing ghosts from old kung fu movies. Maybe that's all this was. Maybe the brain tumor Dr. Hoffman had mentioned as a possibility was making him see patterns that didn't exist, connections that were just the desperate mathematics of a dying mind trying to make sense of random tragedy. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Marcus set his messenger bag on the floor but kept his hand on the strap, an anchor to the real world, to the documented facts and careful research that had governed his professional life. "Help me expose them. Use your access to the Academy archives, your contacts in the industry. Help me prove that the Iron Lotus Society has been using Hollywood to perfect techniques that go far beyond traditional martial arts." Dr. Moreau leaned back in her chair, studying him with those unsettling green eyes. "In exchange, I'll give you the answers you've been seeking. complete answers. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not the cancer this time, but the old anxiety that had plagued him since that October day in Hong Kong. The fear that had driven him to document everything, to build walls of evidence around himself like a fortress against uncertainty. And if I refuse? Then you go home, take your pain medication, and wait for them to find you. Just like they found Chen Wei-ming. Just like they found Tommy Morrison last month. Dr. Moreau picked up the coin, its surface reflecting the candlelight in ways that hurt to look at directly. At least the others died quickly. A heart attack, a stroke, an aneurysm. Clinical deaths that left their bodies in impossible positions, but deaths nonetheless. The thought of dying like that, frozen mid-movement, trapped in some grotesque martial arts pose, made Marcus's skin crawl. But worse was the possibility that he'd spent his entire adult life chasing shadows, that his marriage and relationship with his daughter had been sacrificed to delusions. What if you're wrong? The question came out harsher than he'd intended. What if there's no conspiracy, no ancient society, no supernatural enhancement? What if we're just two crazy people convincing each other that random coincidences are part of some grand design? Dr. Moreau was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her teacup. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Marcus's chest tighten further. Then we're crazy people with access to some very dangerous information. And dangerous people tend to have accidents, regardless of whether their theories are correct. She met his eyes across the table. The question isn't whether we're right or wrong, Mr. Chen. The question is whether you want to die knowing the truth or wondering about it. Marcus looked around the private room, taking in the photographs that covered every wall, decades of martial arts masters, many of whom he recognized from his research, many of whom were now dead. The weight of all those accumulated coincidences pressed down on him like the cancer itself, another invisible killer eating away at his peace of mind. His phone buzzed with a text. "Sarah, Dad, please call me. I'm worried about you." The simple message cut through his paranoid fog like a knife. Here was his daughter, reaching out despite their recent arguments, still hoping to salvage some connection before time ran out. And here he sat in a hidden room above Los Angeles, contemplating diving even deeper into the obsession that had already cost him so much. "I have a granddaughter," Marcus said, surprised by his own words. "Emma. She's 7. She likes to draw pictures of dinosaurs and thinks I'm some kind of film expert because I worked in Hollywood." He pulled out his phone, showing Dr. Moreau the lock screen photo of a gap-toothed little girl holding up a crayon drawing of a T-Rex. "If I do this, if I help you, what happens to her?" Dr. Moreau studied the photograph, and for the first time that evening, her expression softened slightly. "That depends entirely on what we find, Mr. Chen, and how quickly we find it." Marcus stared at Emma's drawing for another long moment, memorizing the crooked lines of her dinosaur, the way she'd colored outside the boundaries with deliberate confidence. When he looked up, Dr. Moreau was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, calculation mixed with something that might have been sympathy. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told you yet. More secrets?" Marcus almost laughed, but the sound came out hollow. "I'm not sure I can handle any more revelations tonight." Dr. Moreau reached into her jacket and withdrew a manila envelope, worn at the edges as if it had been handled many times. She placed it on the table between them, but didn't open it immediately. "Your granddaughter isn't safe regardless of what you choose tonight. The Iron Lotus Society doesn't just eliminate witnesses, they eliminate bloodlines, anyone who might carry the genetic markers that allow them to perceive what others cannot." Marcus felt the room tilt around him. "What are you talking about? Why do you think you could see what happened to Benny Urquidez when the cameras couldn't capture it properly? Why do you think you've been able to identify the patterns others miss?" Dr. Moreau's voice remained steady, but her words hit Marcus like physical blows. "It's not obsession driving your investigation, Mr. Chen. It's ability, a very rare, very dangerous ability." The envelope seemed to pulse on the table between them, full of answers Marcus suddenly wasn't sure he wanted. His phone buzzed again, another message from Sarah, but he couldn't bring himself to look at it. The weight of 40 years of questions was crushing, but the weight of what Dr. Moreau was implying felt unbearable. You're saying Emma might... I'm saying they'll test her when she's old enough. And if she shows any sign of the gift that runs in your family line, she'll disappear into their program just like dozens of other children have over the decades. Dr. Moreau opened the envelope and withdrew a series of photographs. These are surveillance images from the last 6 months. They've already started watching her. Marcus grabbed the photos with shaking hands. Emma at her elementary school playground. Emma walking with Sarah outside a grocery store. Emma in their backyard, showing off a new bicycle, all taken from a distance with telephoto lenses, but unmistakably his granddaughter being monitored by strangers. The last photograph was different. It showed Emma standing in Sarah's living room, but her shadow on the wall was wrong, too long, too angular, just like Jackie Chan's shadow in the photograph Dr. Moreau had shown him earlier. She's already manifesting, Dr. Moreau said softly. The ability usually emerges around age 7 or 8. They know this. They're waiting. Marcus felt something fundamental break inside him, like a dam giving way after years of pressure. All his careful research, his meticulous documentation, his desperate search for truth, none of it had been academic curiosity. It had been preparation for this moment, when the mystery would finally reach out and claim his family. What do they want from her? The same thing they wanted from all the others: to understand how the gift works, to replicate it, to create an army of enhanced fighters who can perceive and manipulate forces that ordinary humans can't even see. Dr. Moreau gathered the photographs back into the envelope. Your granddaughter has the potential to be one of the most powerful practitioners they've ever encountered. Or she could end up like the failed experiments, dead before her 10th birthday. Marcus thought of Emma's laugh, the way she'd insisted on explaining dinosaur facts to him during their last visit, her absolute certainty that T-Rex had tiny arms but a huge heart. The idea of that bright, fearless child being subjected to whatever had been done to Benny Urquidez made him physically ill. How long do we have? Her 8th birthday is in 3 months. They traditionally make their move just before or after that milestone. Dr. Moreau leaned forward. But if we can expose them first, if we can bring enough attention to their operation, they'll have to go underground, abandon their current projects. Give Emma a chance to grow up normal. Marcus pulled out his phone and finally read Sarah's message. Emma drew you a new picture today. She wants to show you her latest dinosaur facts. Can you come over this weekend? His daughter was trying to rebuild bridges between them, offering him precious time with his granddaughter that he might not have many chances to accept. But now he understood that every moment he spent in normal family activities was time Emma's watchers were using to prepare. He typed back quickly, I love you both. Keep Emma close this week. Don't let her walk to school alone. Then he looked up at Dr. Moreau, feeling the last of his old life slip away like water through his fingers. Where do we start? Her smile was sharp as a blade. We start by breaking into Jackie Chan's private archive. Tonight? Marcus stared at Dr. Moreau across the candlelit table, her words echoing in the sudden silence. You want to break into Jackie Chan's private archive. Tonight. He said it slowly, as if testing the weight of each word. The same Jackie Chan who might be part of an ancient supernatural conspiracy. The same Jackie Chan who has spent 40 years perfecting techniques that no human should be able to master without enhancement. Dr. Moreau stood, smoothing down her black dress. His private collection contains documentation going back to his training at the China Drama Academy. Film footage, correspondence, medical records. Everything we need to understand how the Iron Lotus Society recruited him. Marcus felt a hysterical laugh building in his chest. 6 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether to increase his pain medication dosage. Now he was being asked to commit a felony against one of the world's most beloved action stars to save his granddaughter from supernatural kidnappers. This is insane. Even if I wanted to help you, I don't know the first thing about breaking and entering. I'm a film archivist, not a spy. You won't be alone. Dr. Moreau moved to one of the photographs on the wall, a behind-the-scenes shot from police story. She pressed something hidden in the frame, and Marcus heard a soft click. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. The Lotus Group has been preparing for this moment for years. From the hidden passage stepped a figure that made Marcus's breath catch. Asian, probably mid-30s, wearing dark clothing that seemed to absorb the candlelight. But it was the man's movement that triggered Marcus's enhanced perception. Every step perfectly balanced, every gesture containing the potential for explosive violence. This wasn't just martial arts training. This was something else entirely. "Marcus Chen," the newcomer said, his accent carrying traces of Hong Kong. "I am David Zhao. I worked as Jackie's stunt double from 1985 to 1992. Marcus recognized the name immediately. David Zhao had been legendary in the Hong Kong film industry, one of the few stuntmen who could match Jackie's impossible physicality. He disappeared suddenly in the early 90s, rumors claiming everything from a career-ending injury to a falling out over creative differences. "You're supposed to be dead," Marcus said numbly. David's smile was grim. "In a way, I am. The person I was before I learned the truth about the Iron Lotus Society died the night I tried to leave their program." He pulled back his sleeve, revealing a series of scars along his forearm that seemed to form a pattern. The same twisted symbols Marcus had seen on Dr. Moreau's coin. "They marked me as property. I've been running ever since." "Running and gathering intelligence," Dr. Moreau added. David has spent the last 30 years documenting their operations from the inside. He knows where Jackie keeps his private archive, how to access it, and most importantly, how to identify which materials will give us the evidence we need. Marcus sank back into his chair, overwhelmed. The rational part of his mind, the part that had built a career on careful research and methodical analysis, screamed that this was elaborate fantasy. But his enhanced perception, the same ability that had allowed him to see what happened to Benny Urquidez, was picking up details that couldn't be ignored. The way David moved wasn't entirely human. Dr. Moreau's shadow fell at impossible angles. Even the air in the room felt charged with potential energy. "What exactly are we looking for in this archive?" "Training films," David said. "Not the sanitized versions that made it into his movies, but the real footage. Jackie has been documenting his enhancement sessions since 1978. Video evidence of techniques that violate every law of physics, of transformations that turn ordinary martial artists into something beyond human capability. And his medical records," Dr. Moreau added. "Blood work, genetic analysis, psychological evaluations. The Iron Lotus Society is methodical about tracking the effects of their experiments. If we can prove that Jackie has been subjected to systematic enhancement, we can expose the entire program." Marcus thought of Emma's shadow in the surveillance photograph, too long and angular for a 7-year-old girl. "And you think this evidence will be enough to stop them from taking my granddaughter?" "I think it will give us leverage," Dr. Moreau said carefully. "The Iron Lotus Society has survived for centuries by staying hidden. Public exposure would force them to retreat, at least temporarily. Long enough for Emma to develop her abilities naturally, to learn to defend herself." David stepped closer to the table, and Marcus caught something in his expression, a mixture of hope and desperation that felt familiar. "There are others, Mr. Chen, children like your granddaughter, scattered around the world, all being watched, all being evaluated. If we can break their recruitment pipeline, we can save more than just Emma." Marcus pulled out his phone again, looking at the lock screen photo of his granddaughter holding her dinosaur drawing. In 3 months, strangers would come for her. Unless he chose to trust these people, chose to believe in conspiracies that sounded like the plot of a bad thriller novel. "When?" he asked quietly. Dr. Moreau checked her watch. "Jackie's in Singapore for the next 4 days promoting his latest film. His Beverly Hills house will be empty except for basic security. We go tonight, or we wait another month for the next opportunity." Marcus stood slowly, his joints protesting. "Then we better get started." The drive to Beverly Hills took 45 minutes through Los Angeles traffic that never seemed to sleep. Marcus sat in the passenger seat of David's modified Honda Civic, watching the city lights blur past while his hands trembled, whether from fear or the cancer he couldn't tell anymore. In the back seat, Dr. Moreau worked quietly with what looked like sophisticated surveillance equipment, her fingers dancing over tablet screens that displayed building schematics and security camera layouts. "The external cameras rotate on a 12-minute cycle," she murmured, not looking up from her work. "David will have exactly 90 seconds to disable the motion sensors at the east entrance while I loop the feed from the interior hallway monitors." Marcus tried to focus on the technical details, but his mind kept drifting to Emma. By now, Sarah would have put her to bed, probably after reading 3 dinosaur books and answering 17 questions about whether paleontologists ever got scared when they found really big bones. The normalcy of that bedtime routine felt like something from another universe. "You're overthinking," David said, glancing at Marcus in the rearview mirror. "I can see it in your posture, the tension in your shoulders. I'm about to break into Jackie Chan's house to steal evidence of a supernatural conspiracy. I think a little tension is appropriate." David's laugh was surprisingly warm. "You know, I used to double for him in crowd scenes, stand-ins during blocking rehearsals. For months, I thought I was just exceptionally gifted at mimicking his movement style." He turned onto Sunset Boulevard, the iconic street stretching ahead of them like a path into darker territory. "It wasn't until I saw him take a fall that should have broken every bone in his body and walk away without a scratch that I started asking questions." "What happened when you tried to leave?" Marcus asked. The car grew quiet, except for the soft electronic beeping from Dr. Moreau's equipment. David's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and Marcus caught a glimpse of those scarred symbols on his forearm in the dashboard light. "They don't let you leave," David said finally. "Not once you've seen what they can do. The marking ceremony is designed to create a psychic bond. They can track enhanced individuals anywhere in the world, monitor their vital signs, even influence their thoughts if the connection is strong enough." Dr. Moreau looked up from her tablets. "Which is why we have to be careful tonight. If Jackie is more deeply integrated into their program than we suspect, he might sense our presence in his personal space even from Singapore." Marcus felt his chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't the cancer. "You're saying he might know we're there?" "I'm saying we need to work fast and get out clean." Dr. Moreau began packing her equipment into a sleek black bag. David's scarring makes him partially invisible to their tracking, a side effect they didn't anticipate. "But you and I are exposed." They turned into the hills, the roads winding upward through neighborhoods where each house cost more than Marcus had earned in his entire career. The manicured lawns and elaborate security gates felt surreal, like a movie set designed to represent wealth rather than the real thing. Marcus had spent decades working in Hollywood, but he'd always remained outside this world of genuine celebrity luxury. "There," David said, pointing to a modernist structure that seemed to flow organically from the hillside. Even in the darkness, Marcus could see it was spectacular. All clean lines and enormous windows, designed to showcase both the architecture and the view of the city below. Jackie bought it in 2003, had it completely renovated with hidden chambers for his private collection. Dr. Moreau handed Marcus a small earpiece and what looked like a modified smartphone. "Communication device and scanner. Point it at any document or photograph and it will create a digital copy. Try not to touch anything unnecessarily. The less physical evidence we leave behind, the better." Marcus took the devices with hands that felt clumsy and disconnected from his body. "I still don't understand why you need me for this. You two are obviously the professionals." "Because you're the only one who can identify what's important," David said as he pulled over 3 blocks from Jackie's house. "Dr. Moreau understands the science. I know the operational details, but you've spent 40 years studying every frame of footage from that era. You'll recognize documentation that we might overlook." The car fell silent as they prepared for what came next. Marcus looked at his phone one more time. Seeing a new message from Sarah, Emma fell asleep holding the dinosaur book. "She wants to call you tomorrow to share her latest discovery about Triceratops." The mundane sweetness of his granddaughter's enthusiasm felt like a lifeline to sanity. Whatever happened in the next few hours, whatever they found in Jackie Chan's secret archive, Marcus would hold on to that connection to normal family love. "Ready?" Dr. Moreau asked. Marcus pocketed his phone and opened the car door. Let's go save my granddaughter. The security system went down exactly as Dr. Moreau had predicted, but walking through Jackie Chan's darkened house felt like trespassing in a temple. Marcus followed David through corridors lined with movie posters and martial arts weapons, his enhanced perception picking up traces of something that made his skin crawl, a lingering energy that felt ancient and hungry. "The private archive is behind the home theater," David whispered through the earpiece. Jackie had it designed to look like part of the entertainment system, but it's actually a climate-controlled vault. They moved through rooms that showcased 4 decades of cinematic achievement. Awards glittered in display cases. Photographs showed Jackie with everyone from Steven Spielberg to Bruce Lee. But Marcus's enhanced sight caught details that ordinary visitors would miss. Shadows that fell wrong, reflections in glass that didn't match the objects casting them, and underneath it all, an electromagnetic hum that made his teeth ache. Dr. Moreau's voice crackled through the comm. "Motion sensors are clean for the next 8 minutes. Whatever you're going to find it fast." The theater room was dominated by a massive screen and leather seating for 20. But David led Marcus to what appeared to be a decorative panel featuring Chinese calligraphy. When David pressed a hidden switch, the panel slid aside to reveal a steel door with an electronic lock. "Biometric scanner," Marcus observed, his heart sinking. David smiled and pulled out what looked like a normal smartphone. Jackie's not the only one with enhanced abilities. He pressed his palm against the scanner, and Marcus watched in fascination as David's fingerprints seemed to shift and flow until they matched the stored pattern. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Shape-shifting? Limited tactile mimicry, one of the unintended benefits of the scarring process. David's expression darkened. They were trying to make me into a perfect stunt double, someone who could literally become Jackie for the most dangerous sequences. The vault beyond was everything Marcus had expected and more. Filing cabinets lined the walls, filled with meticulously organized documentation. Video equipment from every era of filming technology sat on custom shelving. But it was the photographs covering one entire wall that made Marcus's enhanced perception flare with recognition. They showed Jackie in training sessions that clearly weren't normal martial arts practice. In some images, he appeared to be sparring with opponents whose shadows moved independently of their bodies. Others captured him performing techniques that bent light around his fists, creating geometric patterns in the air that hurt to look at directly. "Jesus," Marcus breathed, raising the scanner device Dr. Moreau had given him. "These aren't special effects. This is actual documentation of supernatural enhancement." He began photographing everything, his hands moving with desperate efficiency. Training schedules that referenced Iron Lotus conditioning sessions. Medical reports tracking changes in bone density and neural activity that defied human norms. Correspondence with individuals whose names Marcus recognized from his research. Martial arts masters who had all died in that impossible fighting stance. But it was a particular filing cabinet labeled recruitment protocols that made Marcus's blood turn to ice. Inside were psychological profiles of children around the world, each marked with evaluation codes and surveillance photographs. The files were organized by age, starting with 5-year-olds and extending to teenagers. His hands shook as he found Emma's file. The documentation was terrifyingly thorough. Not just surveillance photos, but genetic analysis based on hair samples somehow obtained from her school. Psychological assessments compiled from interviews with her teachers, even a detailed floor plan of Sarah's house with optimal entry points marked, but the final page nearly brought him to his knees. It was titled Enhancement Compatibility Assessment and rated Emma as Priority Alpha, exceptional potential for advanced integration. "David," Marcus called out, his voice cracking. "You need to see this." David appeared beside him, scanning the documents over Marcus's shoulder. His curse was creative and multilingual. "They're not just watching her, they're planning immediate extraction." Marcus found his phone and took pictures of every page in Emma's file with trembling fingers. As he worked, his enhanced perception began picking up something new. A change in the electromagnetic field around them, like the air before a thunderstorm. "Something's wrong," he whispered. David's head snapped up, and Marcus saw his expression transform from focused to terrified. He knows we're here. Jackie's connected to the house's security system through his enhancement. He's coming back. Dr. Moreau's voice exploded through their earpieces. Unknown aircraft approaching from the south. Private jet changing course toward LAX. You have maybe 30 minutes before... The lights in the vault suddenly blazed to life, and every electronic device in the room began emitting a high-pitched whine that made Marcus clutch his head in agony. The photographs on the wall started moving, the figures in them turning to stare directly at the intruders with eyes that glowed like amber coals. "The files!" David shouted over the electronic screaming. "Grab everything about Emma!" Marcus stuffed the documents into his jacket, his enhanced vision now picking up something that made rational thought nearly impossible. The shadows in the room were reaching toward them like living things, stretching across the floor with predatory intent. They ran. The shadows pursued them through the corridor like hunting wolves, elongating and stretching with impossible fluidity. Marcus's enhanced vision picked up their movement in horrifying detail, tendrils of darkness that defied every law of physics, reaching for his ankles with predatory intelligence. Behind them, the vault's electronic screaming had transformed into something that sounded almost like laughter. The front door, David gasped, but as they rounded the corner toward the entrance, Marcus saw their escape route sealed by a wall of writhing shadow that pulsed with malevolent energy. "Back exit." Dr. Moreau's voice crackled through their earpieces, barely audible over bursts of static. "Kitchen leads to..." The transmission cut to white noise. David grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him toward the rear of the house, but Marcus could feel his body failing. The cancer, the enhanced perception overload, the sheer terror of being hunted by supernatural forces, it was all crashing down at once. His legs buckled, and Emma's files scattered across the marble floor. "Leave me," Marcus wheezed, dropping to his knees to gather the precious documents. "Get the evidence out." Not happening. David hauled him to his feet with impossible strength, but as they stumbled forward, the house itself seemed to turn against them. Walls shifted subtly, corridors stretching longer than they should. The photographs lining the hallways watched them pass with glowing eyes, and Marcus caught glimpses of figures stepping partially out of their frames. They burst into the kitchen just as the lights died completely. In the darkness, Marcus's enhanced sight revealed something that stopped his heart. Jackie Chan stood silhouetted in the doorway to the garden, but this wasn't the beloved action star from the movies. This version of Jackie moved with fluid precision that belonged to something inhuman, his eyes burning with amber fire identical to the photographs in the vault. "Mr. Chen," Jackie said, his familiar voice carrying harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly in Marcus's bones. "You've seen things tonight that were not meant for ordinary perception." David stepped protectively in front of Marcus, his scarred arms beginning to glow with faint symbols. "Jackie, you don't have to do this. Fight the programming." Jackie's head tilted at an unnatural angle, and when he smiled, Marcus caught a glimpse of teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. "Programming implies external control, David. But I chose this path. I chose to become something greater than human limitation." The air in the kitchen grew thick and oppressive. Marcus felt the documents in his jacket growing warm, as if the papers themselves were reacting to Jackie's presence. His phone buzzed with an incoming call, Sarah's name on the display, but when he tried to answer, the device crumbled to dust in his hands. "The girl shows exceptional promise," Jackie continued, taking a step closer. The shadows gathered around him like a living cloak. "She will be collected tomorrow evening. Her training will begin immediately. Over my dead body," Marcus snarled, surprised by the strength in his own voice. Jackie's inhuman smile widened. "That can certainly be arranged." David lunged forward with enhanced speed, but Jackie moved like liquid mercury, flowing around the attack and placing his palm against David's chest. Light exploded between them, and David collapsed with smoke rising from the scar patterns on his arms. Marcus ran. He burst through the sliding glass door onto the back patio, his lungs burning and his vision tunneling. Behind him, he could hear Jackie's laughter following, no longer entirely human. The enhanced perception that had been his gift and curse now showed him the true horror. Jackie's shadow stretched impossibly long across the patio, reaching for him with dozens of grasping appendages. He made it to the garden wall before his body finally betrayed him completely. The cancer, the overexertion, the supernatural terror, everything converged at once. Marcus collapsed face first into Jackie's meticulously maintained flower bed, Emma's scattered documents floating around him like autumn leaves. Through fading consciousness, he felt Jackie's presence approaching. When the enhanced martial artist leaned down, Marcus could smell something metallic and ancient on his breath. "The files were copies," Jackie said softly, almost kindly. "Did you really think we hadn't anticipated this? Every document you photographed, every piece of evidence you thought you gathered, all carefully curated fiction." Marcus's heart shattered. The medical reports, the training photographs, Emma's assessment file, everything had been an elaborate trap, but the enhancement compatibility— "Oh, that part was real," Jackie confirmed, and Marcus heard the sound of paper tearing. "Your granddaughter is remarkably gifted. She'll make an excellent addition to our program." As darkness closed in, Marcus felt Jackie's fingers press against his forehead. The last thing he experienced was the sensation of his enhanced perception being systematically dismantled, his mind wiped clean of everything he'd learned about the Iron Lotus Society. When consciousness finally faded, Emma's dinosaur drawing, somehow transported from his apartment, lay burning in the flower bed beside him.